Hey, it's Brady welcoming you back to the Thursday Night Podcast for the start of a new series we're rolling out for the 2025 football season called Ask the Expert, where we bring on a guest who knows their stuff and can tell us all about Georgia State's upcoming opponent. So this week I'm talking with Michael Katz, who covers Ole Miss athletics for the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. To preview the Panthers' season opener at Ole Miss, Michael, thank you for coming on, starting the season off. Should also say I'm staying in Tupelo for this game, and the Daily Journal is published in Tupelo, so it almost turned out symmetrical like that.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to get a hotel in Oxford on game day these days. I've heard prices are pretty exorbitant.
Well, there was a converted shipping container in Oxford that I didn't pull the trigger on, then that disappeared, and so ended up with a hotel in Tupelo, and that was fine. I also think the shipping container is probably meant for more than one person anyway, so probably for the best I didn't take that from someone else for the inventory. But talking about the game itself, and I guess your background, to do a little bit of bio, how many years now have you been covering Ole Miss athletics?
So this will be year 5.
All right, so that puts you around the start of the Lane Kiffin era?
I missed the COVID year,
Okay.
2020, and my first year was the 2021 season.
Still kind of fits around the first thing I was going to ask about, which is kind of like the trajectory that the program has taken under Lane Kiffin. I'm not a historian on the program as a whole, but it feels like one of the higher points where the expectations seem higher than ever. And I mean, it's an SEC program, so expectations will be there no matter how good the team's supposed to be, but it feels like Ole Miss is kind of hitting a fever pitch with that.
So I think the stat was Ole Miss has had 9 10-win seasons ever. 3 of them are in the last 4 years. I mean, it's pretty remarkable the consistency that Lane has created here. Obviously, he coming in at a track record of a guy who doesn't stay places very long for one reason or another. There's always rumors of Lane Kiffin the coaching carousel. It's just a rite of passage at this point. Every November we start dealing with this, but so far so good. He stayed, and this is a program that again had not experienced long bouts of consistency. Hugh Freeze had a couple of nice years, and then obviously what happened with Hugh Freeze happened, and then they took a slide, and Matt Luke's time here was a little bit inconsistent, and Lane has really righted the ship in a way that I think I look back to the 2022 season when they went 8-5, and an 8-win season now, I think people would be kind of upset. That's just sort of the standard now. They were upset then at the 8-5 season, and the next year they win 11 games. The next year they win 10 games. I know there's a lot of new faces on this team, and I've been looking at my roster a lot lately because I don't know who a lot of these guys are for the first time in a while. But the standards, it's high here. I mean, this is a program that is expecting to be in the conversation, and I think Lane Kiffin has them believing that they should be.
Yeah, certainly I've been doing the same thing. I mean, G5 turning over roster every year, but there'll be a number I'll see, but like, who's that again? But one of the obvious places where there is a new face is quarterback, because Jackson Dart's a New York Giant, picked in the first round this past year. I guess, what changes with the offense are you expecting with Austin Simmons? Is he a similar type of prototype of what Lane Kiffin is like to have in there? Is it changing? And just what are your expectations for him heading into what's going to be his first year as the starter in Oxford?
Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed when we came to spring practice. I was like, where's Jackson Dart? Like, this is the first time I haven't seen him in 3 years. Like, you get to know these guys, and you learn who they are as players and people, and I don't think it can be understated how good Jackson was last year. I mean, led the nation in passing efficiency. I think he led the nation in passing yards. He was first team All-SEC, the first team All-SEC quarterback for Ole Miss since Eli Manning in 2004 or 2003, whatever it was. He was remarkably good. Jackson had his ups and downs early in his career. Lane Kiffin brought in some guys to test him, and he passed every test, and he just was better because of it. Jackson was the heart and soul of this program, and I don't think that can be. I think that goes a long way. Obviously, the talent. He's a first-round pick for a reason. He's been killing it. But he kind of willed them. He was the emotional, soul heart of this team for 3 years. Austin he's a different personality. Jackson's a very emotional, fiery guy. Austin is very kind of mellow, low key. He's been working on it being louder and being that presence in the locker room. And when we're talking, I guess stylistically, the first thing that's going to stand out, he's a lefty. You don't see a lot of those in college football. The arm is insane. He was thrown 95 as a freshman out of the bullpen for the Ole Miss baseball team. I mean, he is remarkably talented, but he's very different than Jackson, especially Jackson late in his career. I think in a perfect world, they're not. Austin isn't lowering his shoulder on linebackers the way Jackson was, if nothing else for preservation. But Austin's a really good athlete for sure. I just don't think they want to put him in situations like that. But I know a lot of people are really excited for Austin and the future and him being, he's the first, this is the guy Lane got out of high school, right? Jackson was a transfer portal guy. When he got here, Matt Corral was already here. Like, this is the guy that he picked from the high school ranks to be his guy. And I think there's a lot of excitement there. But I think to expect him to do what Jackson did last year as a redshirt sophomore it's kind of unfair. It's maybe a little unrealistic. I think he's going to be good, but Jackson turned the ball over a lot his first year. 11 picks. He had 11 the next 2 years combined. I'm not saying that's what Austin is going to be, but I think there might be a little bit of a learning curve. You're going to see in flashes. He had a scrimmage a couple weeks ago where it sounds like he made a lot of key errors, and then over the next couple he cleaned them up. So, he's already graduated from college at 19 or 20. He graduated from high school early. He's a really smart kid, but he is still a redshirt sophomore who's never started a game. So the expectations are high because of the Georgia game last year, where he really sort of got himself on the map when Jackson got hurt, and he came in and led that touchdown drive, and everyone was like, "Oh, this kid's legit." I think that puts a lot of pressure on a guy, and the expectations are high. I think he's going to be really good. I just don't know if it's going to happen immediately.
And then on the other side, lots of players from last year's very good Ole Miss defense are off the team now, have moved on, a fair amount of them to the NFL. But Pete Golding's still there, and obviously Ole Miss thinks a great deal about Pete Golding because he's one of the better paid coordinators now in college football as of a couple of weeks ago when that news came out. So I guess probably the expectation is more of the same from the defense, no matter who is going out there lining up.
I mean, yeah, you talk to the players, and they are not expecting any difference. I mean, they're expecting the standard's the standard, and they're not expecting a drop-off. I think personnel-wise, that defense last year was so good. I mean, Walter Nolan, first-round pick, Princely Umanmielen, an all-SEC player, J.J. Pegues, Jared Ivey, Chris Paul Jr., Trey Amos. I mean, all these guys, all these draft picks. It was a pretty special defense. Number 2 scoring defense in the country, 14.4 points per game. I think only to Ohio State in terms of scoring defense. I mean, that was an elite unit. Obviously, it's going to look different, and they're younger, but I think they're really talented, particularly on the defensive line. I mean, that's where it all starts. That's where it started last year. Ole Miss, I believe, led the nation in sacks per game and tackles for loss. I mean, they lived on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And I think that's the goal this year too. It's a different looking group. They've that last year's group was, again, Walter Nolan and Princely, these high profile transfers from SEC programs. This year, a lot of the defensive line is homegrown guys who were 4-star, 5-star recruits over the last few years, and they've just kind of been growing them into the right roles. And it sounds like they're ready. Of course, Lane Kiffin always uses the transfer portal well, so we got a couple of edge rushers out of there. But this is I think it's going to feel a little bit more homegrown up front. Expecting them to do statistically the things they did last year, I don't know if that's necessarily fair, at least as of yet. But I think they're really talented in this idea that they're going to drop off a cliff. I know people worry about that when you lose as many guys as they did. I don't think that's going to happen. One, they're talented, and two, Pete Golding's really good. He's done a really nice job at Ole Miss, and you think about Lane Kiffin coach teams, it's offense, but that defense was at times the best part of that team last year. The offense had its bumps. They couldn't run the ball at certain moments. The defense bailed them out in a lot of situations. So I think the goal is obviously you want it to be pretty even, but I think that this defense has a chance to be really good once again. Not the key, the marquee players we know of, other than Centurion Perkins is the superstar there. 10.5 sacks last year. He's a homegrown guy too. He's from the state. He was a 5-star kid. That was one of Pete Golding's huge recruiting wins when he got here. So it's gonna not be the brand name guys yet. I think that the product's gonna be pretty good still.
All right, let's run through the two scenarios for this game broadly as possible, because what might make Lane Kiffin mad in a press conference versus what make a fan base mad. Like, we don't need to put a number value on it, but say this game is not going to general expectations in Georgia State's favor. What are the things that might be going wrong to where, whether that makes it's a 25-point game or maybe it's just a little below the number, but still something just feels off? Like, what would that be for Ole Miss that you think would they be worried about?
That Ole Miss wouldn't be doing right?
Would not be, yes.
Yeah, I think it starts, it sounds, again, I'm putting pressure on the kid, but I think it starts with Austin Simmons a little bit. You don't need him to have a 400-yard passing game, but I think you need him to be efficient, to be in rhythm. You need to see at least enough good things, because next week you got Kentucky and then you got Arkansas after that. You don't really have a chance to ease into things this year. I think you need to see good things from him. An efficient performance. I also think too, the run game was a really big emphasis for Ole Miss last year. There were 2 or 3 games. Listen, they lost 3 games by 13 points, and let's be honest, if they're able to run the ball better, they probably win 2 of those, and they're in the playoff. And I would have liked their odds with the talent they had. But it didn't work, and a lot of that was because of inability to run the ball when they needed to. I think running the ball is going to be huge, maybe not even just for this game, but getting it established. They've got new running backs, they've got a new offensive line. I think if Lane really needs to see this team in rhythm, because there's just so much unknown about the offense, particularly. The defense, it is newer guys, but it's guys who've at least been here. The offense it's a lot of new guys. I think the other thing too, defensively specifically, they need to stop the big pass play, and that was a problem last year at times. As good as that defense was, the secondary had its moments, and most of that secondary's gone now. So you got new faces. I know that Georgia State's got a really good receiver that's gonna test Ole Miss, and I think that's a good first test to have. That you're gonna have a guy who looks like an SEC receiver out there in the first game of the year. I think blown coverages, things like that, I think are gonna drive Lane and Pete Golding insane. I think their great pass rush is gonna make up for a lot of it. But they can't be letting guys run wide open. That's how they lost the Kentucky game. It was 4th and 10 at their own 15, and they complete a 70-yard pass down the field because Barry and Brown, I believe it was, broke coverage. You can't have things like that happening, because in the long run, maybe not this game, but those are the things that are going to cost them in SEC play. So I think those are the things. The obviously Austin, the run game, and then just they can't give up the big pass play. If it's happening in the first game, what's going to happen against Arkansas, against LSU, against Tulane? All these teams that have really good quarterbacks and receivers too. The SEC has a lot of these. I think it'll be a good first test.
And then on the other side of things, say it's all going hunky-dory, maybe they're at the cover number in the middle of the third quarter. How is Lane approaching these type of games? Because you look last year, they hung 70-something on Furman. They beat Middle Tennessee 52-3. I guess how much of those were pedal to the metal a lot of the ways, or how much of it was just eventually letting some other guys get reps and it just happened to be those scores got a little bit bloated?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I don't think he ever took anybody out at halftime. I think guys usually played at least a series or two in the third quarter. I think the interesting thing here, though, this year is, last year you had those first four games, which were all your non-conference games, which let's be honest, were not very hard tests for them. This year they play a non-conference game and then they go right into SEC play. I think maybe that changes the calculus a little bit of how long you leave guys in. I don't think you want guys leaving on you might be up by a lot, but what if you don't want them leaving on a bad drive, right? I think that they need to sort of figure some things out, logistically, rotation-wise. You need to feel good heading into that Kentucky game because, yeah, Ole Miss should beat up Kentucky, but they should have last year, and they didn't. I think that the schedule's interesting, and I'm curious to see what Lane does in terms of, say this is a 4 touchdown game in the third quarter. Do you leave guys in and make them work through certain things that you need to work on for next week? Because obviously you only got a few practice days next week. How much do you try to work on during games when you start SEC play right away? It's an interesting schedule. So, last year, the backups I think would have probably won those games too, and the backups did good things. That's where we saw Austin for the first time, was as a backup, and they, no one in that non-conference schedule really had much of a chance, even against that second team that Ole Miss had. You don't have that luxury this year though. After the first game, you get right into it. So I'm very curious to see how Lane handles the hypothetical blowout status. So, like, how long do you leave guys in? Because the worst thing you can do is lose a guy to injury in a blowout. That's the one thing fans will never forgive you for, is leaving a guy in and suffering a catastrophic injury when you're up by 40. I'm curious to see how he balances it.
And I guess the last thing on the football side I'd ask is just generally, who are you curious about? Whether names to watch, but also just who you're waiting to see this fall.
Yeah, so the wide receiver room is completely new for the most part. They returned Caden Lee, who had almost 900 yards last year, but Trey Harris was a guy who, I think he only played 6 full games last year, and he had 1,000 yards. I mean, he would have been an All-American if he hadn't gotten hurt. When he got hurt, things got bad for Ole Miss during games. He's gone. Jordan Watkins was a 4th-round pick. Juice Wells, was a 500, 600-yard guy last year. Caden Prieskorn was a 400-yard tight end. All those guys are gone, and they brought in really talented guys who have produced at high levels. Deshaun Stribling from Oklahoma State. Harrison Wallace III from Penn State, obviously was a big part of their playoff run last year. I'm curious to see what the rotation looks like, because Lane has said this is the deepest receiver room he's ever had here, which is pretty high praise because they've had some pretty good receivers here in his time. But when this offense is at its best, as he said, they're rotating a lot. So I'm curious, like, who are the ones? And even if it's not the ones, how frequently are these other guys getting in there? They brought in 4 4-star transfers at receiver this year. They signed a 5-star receiver in the high school ranks. How much are they going to put on these guys, and how frequently are they going to be rotating? And is this a team that has one guy who has 1,000 yards, or is this a team that has a bunch of guys that have like 500 yards? I'm really curious to see how they sort of divvy things up, because obviously you got to keep everybody happy. That's not the most important part of this thing. But you got a lot of people who can do a lot of different things. I'm curious if one guy emerges as the guy, or are there a lot of guys? That's been my whole question the whole offseason. The talent is tremendous in that room, but I'm really curious to see how it actually looks.
And then the last thing from me, for fans making this trip to Oxford, for intrepid reporters out there who might need a place that's open after everything post-game, and just whatever other you want to throw out about the Oxford experience for people who are coming for the first time, what they need to check out.
Oxford is a great little town. I'm from Los Angeles, so I was not a Southern man coming into this. I lived in Boise. I lived in Laramie, Wyoming. Had never been. I think the furthest south that I've ever been was Texas. And this place is fantastic. I know it's routinely called one of the better college towns in America, depending on the poll. It is the best college town. You got to go down to the square. That's a no-brainer. That's kind of the downtown area. A lot of cool little shops and restaurants, bars, that kind of thing. It's going to be a little bit tough after the game since it's a night game. Things in Oxford aren't usually open super late. One place I can guarantee will probably be open is it's called the Library. It is not where you get books. It is a bar on the square. That is the pop-in place. That is where I think a lot of people are going to be after that game. Food-wise, I think Ajax is one of the biggest destinations. It's just delicious comfort food, incredible meatloaf, chicken fried steak, things like that. Other than that, there's just you just walk around the square and you will find something that tickles your fancy. There's so many awesome restaurants, especially if you get here. Say you come in Thursday or Friday and you have a little extra time, just walk around the square and you will find some cool stuff, whether it's a bookstore, whether it's a coffee shop, whether it's a craft beer place, or just some really good food. There's just a lot happening over there.
Well, Michael, thanks for the food talk. Thanks for the football talk. Thanks for coming on the Thursday Night Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.